In a country where every fluctuation sends shockwaves through the market, the exchange rate isn't just a number. It's a barometer that Nigerians use to measure themselves against global counterparts. From the bustling streets to boardrooms, all eyes are on the exchange rate. This is why the Nigerian government's recent move to block operations of cryptocurrency giants like Binance, OctaFX, and Coinbase caught the attention of everyone this week. Today, we will plunge into the heart of the forex crisis in the country, where the battleground between the government and cryptocurrency giants has intensified. The fact is, there are so many layers to this. As the FX crisis deepens, the clash escalates, pitting regulatory forces against the centralized tides of digital currencies. But what lies beneath the surface of this struggle? Is the government's approach going to solve the problem? How will tech investors perceive Africa's largest nation after this? As the exchange rate wavers on a knife's edge, what lies ahead for Nigeria's tech industry? Stay tuned to Tech Into the Future as we unravel the layers of forex crisis and explore the ramifications of the government's recent tactics and the implications for investors, tech innovators, startups, and regular citizens like you and I.
Hello, and welcome to Tech Into the Future, where we talk about everything that's happening in tech and how it affects you. My name is Tomiwa Ladikomo. I'm the CEO of Tech Cabal, a digital publication that has been covering African tech for the last decade.
And I am Ngozi Maduka-Dozie. I look after Android partnerships for West Africa at Google. Alongside Tomiwa, I will be your guide into the world of technology in Nigeria, Africa, and the world.
So, this week, we're going to start with the headlines and the big headlines of the week.
What a week it's been.
What a week it's been. I mean, we're going to start with one of Nigeria's biggest companies, MTN Nigeria, reporting a 137 billion naira loss in full year 2023 as the naira devaluation shrinks their margins.
This is a big one. So, for those that may not know, right, in order for you to get your service, when your phone rings, that is really because there are these towers that are all over Nigeria, the 773 local governments, and these towers are how they send signal from tower to tower to tower until whoever is calling you reaches your phone, and then you get service. So whenever you run around and you say, I don't have service, it's really literally your distance between you and the tower.
Yep.
And those towers are not made here in Nigeria. So obviously they are a huge part, not just a huge part of the expense, I think almost 50% of the expense of the foreign exchange expense that MTN has. And so that is a big
It's a big chunk.
Big chunk of where the FX challenge comes from.
Exposure.
Exposure, that's the word.
So MTN actually pays those costs in naira, but they're pegged to the dollar.
Exactly.
So doesn't matter.
Tomatoes, tomatoes,
Tomatoes, getting paid in naira,
exactly.
But dollar rises, these costs rise. And I think it's a really, really big switch as against last year's profitability for MTN to have such a massive loss. It's the first time that they've lost money since they've been listed in Nigeria. And it's definitely not a good sign to see a company that big. I mean, we've seen also in other sectors, Nestle declared a sort of really massive loss, also due to the foreign exchange sort of challenge. And so, and we know even smaller companies are having similar issues and swinging from profit positions to loss positions. So it's really, really sort of a telling sign of the damage that this is doing to the economy and this is doing to tech companies. When I look at last year when I spoke to a lot of sort of tech CEOs based here in Nigeria, they were making sort of naira profits and growing their naira revenue and their dollar sort of reporting. Because a lot of these guys take sort of their investments in dollars and so they have to report their revenue in dollars. They were just showing sort of you could show Naira going up this way and then show dollars going that way. And that's only getting steeper this year.
Indeed.
Given loss. So it's going to be a really, really challenging year for companies.
And I think one thing to mention is that these are the reports for last year, right? And so since December 31st, 2023, the Naira has further devalued in a mind-blowing way. Yeah. And so it actually doesn't really, it doesn't set us up nicely for 2024, right?
Yeah.
I don't know when the quarterly numbers are going to come in, but I am definitely curious to see what those numbers are going to look like.
No, Q1 2024 numbers are going to be really tough. And it's interesting. We interviewed sort of the MTN CEO 2, maybe 3 weeks ago. He was quite optimistic about 2024.
Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. But yeah, I think by the time we see Q1 numbers, some of that optimism is definitely going to be dampened, especially given this report. But I guess moving on from sort of MTN.
Yes, this week the Nigerian government declared war on major cryptocurrency platforms, blocking their operations. The headline from Tech Cabal reads, Binance and other crypto platforms suspend USDT and USDC purchases after CBN scrutiny. There's chatter that the government is also going after more IMTOs following the rule changes that that's already making it very difficult for these businesses to transact in Nigeria.
Yeah. So if you use Wise, if you use World Remit, you'd have seen notices lately that say, due to changes by the CBN government, we can no longer transact in Nigeria. So I think crypto and IMTOs, the international money transfer operators, are sort of big targets of the government at the moment as they try to sort of fix the FX thing. It's an interesting approach.
Yes, I think the word interesting is the best word. I don't want to we're going to discuss this further in today's segment, but I think there's a lot of questions, right? First of all, I think for the benefit of our audience, we'll have to go into some of the definitions. You've done a good one with the IMTOs, but even with the USDT and USDC. But the point anyway is that the question for me is this the right way? Was this really the source of the challenges? I imagine, well, let me not speculate.
So some of this will get a bit technical. We'll talk about it in a bit more detail. But it's definitely a place where the government is convinced that a lot of the woes of the Naira relative to the dollar come from. And so it's the area where they're focusing on. The crypto companies, I think, are a particular focus, and one exchange really got hit quite hard this year.
Yes.
This week, Binance, in another headline from Tech Cabal, reads, 2 Binance executives arrested in Nigeria following the website ban.
Okay, so let me ask you. So we have arrested foreign executives, and we are expecting people to invest, foreign investors in Nigeria.
It's
okay,
it's an unorthodox approach. It's an unorthodox approach to making your country a popular place, a popular destination for investment.
Exactly. And I think for me, these are the things that I find challenging. You could have just invited them for a conversation, which is what happens everywhere else in the world. The truth is, it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not strange that you would find, government reps call in. It doesn't even have to be technology. Just call in executives from certain verticals and just say what's going on in your industry, etc. We see it a lot in the tech industry, especially because the innovation that goes on with technology is very difficult to keep on board of what's going on. So a lot of times, and this happens, we work at Google, you see it in the US and in the UK, they're always calling executives from the Metas and the Googles of the world and saying, tell us what's going on, explain to us what's happening with X and Y and Z. So the issue is not that the government wants to have conversations with them or to discuss. It's the arrest that kind of makes that unpalatable, if that's the word I want to use. And again, is not a very welcoming statement to other people that may very well be considering Nigeria as an investment destination.
And I think you'll see that as a whole, Nigeria tends to take a very heavy hand with these kind of regulatory actions. So you've seen it with the Twitter ban, you've seen it with our treatment of just a lot of investments and a lot of sort of spaces around there. With the change of administration, we'd have hoped that there was a more subtle approach to managing stakeholder management, international stakeholder management, especially given that in order to fix the Naira, you need to raise the level of foreign investment.
Yes, indeed.
Raise the amount of foreign capital coming into the country. And so these kind of things are adversarial to investors, are a bit counterintuitive in terms of,
I like the word interesting. It's such a safe word. but I do find it interesting, especially given the number of private sector people that are now in the government, because that's always what you hope to see, is that they understand how the private sector works. And so that heavy-handedness that you would typically see with government, you would have, one would have hoped that we wouldn't see in this administration. But now, in addition to the arresting, yes, there's also the other headline that Nigeria fines Binance $10 billion amidst investigations of crypto exchange.
So you just talked about sort of the private sector influence. The thing about it is that, you got private sector people in government, but one of the areas you can't control is the way sort of the administration speaks. You can't control who speaks for you. Because that particular headline has already been walked back by the president's media aide, Mr. Bayo Ononuga. And so he's already said, no, actually, I didn't actually say there was specifically a 10 billion fine. I didn't specifically say it's already been imposed. So there is, and I think there are two things here. There's a lack of coordination within the government in terms of what policies do they want to implement, what is the impact these policies are having on the economy. And the second thing is that there is a lack of care. I would say, speaking to sort of the arrest of sort of foreign investors in the country, announcing a fine that hasn't been formally declared, that hasn't been formally deliberated, which is going to have huge shockwaves. It's such a nice round number, 10 billion. And it's a number that has already sort of traveled really far and wide. It has an impact on the perception of doing business in your country. And it's something that was spoken about carelessly, that wasn't properly thought about, that was in a proper policy of the administration.
And in this day and age of the internet, I mean, come on, we shouldn't be the ones saying it, but the truth is, once you've said it, it's out there, you Google it and you will find it. So the fact that it's been walked back is neither here nor there. Anyone that's now investigating Nigeria, or what maybe the better word is researching Nigeria, will stumble upon these articles of the 10 billion fine and may or may not see that it was walked back. And so I think, again, this is a tech show. We are in the tech world. I think care is the word that you use that I like. I think there should be a little more care when we speak, especially when you're in a position where your words are, in fact, law, right? If we're not careful. So
stay with us. We're going to break right now, but we'll be back on Tech into the Future.
Thank you for staying with us at Tech into the Future. Believe it or not, there were other things that happened last week, not just the headlines that we discussed. There was also the Omniverse Summit that happened last week, and this summit overarchs themes of building narratives, inspiring innovation, fostering collaboration, and facilitating monetization. On the first day of the summit, there was proper representation of African culture and the tech ecosystem, with the Minister of Art and Culture and Creative Industry announcing a fund of $617 million to be invested in the digital and creative enterprises. Our Rice correspondent Sadiq Suleiman Garba was there and gathered this report.
The first day of the Omniverse Summit 2024 consisted of festivities and a semblance of African culture and the digital ecosystem. It was definitely nothing short of an omniverse. The event kicked off with performances from our very own Optimus Prime and Ekiti Sound featuring Debbie Ohiri. The keynote speakers stepped in order and in emphasis of tapping into the African tech ecosystem. Building bridges with Nigeria is to build and focus on the shaping the Africa with Africa agenda by Germany. First, we have Mr. Massimo Daluco, Head of Cooperation Delegation for Nigeria and ECOWAS.
We are working hard on platforms like Omniverse to bring in all the ecosystem, all the people, incredible people that we have here in Nigeria, to connect and to really enhance the quality and the outreach of their creativity. We are working on TVET and skills to bring really all the futuristic, let's say, skills and capacity that this very sector requires to prosper in Nigeria and globally. We are also working hard with government to make sure that the legal frameworks that we need to implement, whether on 5G, on cybersecurity, on cybercrime, and on data protection, are really up to speed.
Followed by Wert Berner, the Consular General Germany to Lagos.
The German government, most prominently through programs of its Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, is committed to fostering mutually beneficial partnerships with Africa, also with a Pan-African approach. Through our new strategy titled Shaping the Future with Africa, our goal is to engage with African countries in pursuing global structural policies founded on respect and reciprocity by lending structural support to the achievement of the development goals set by the African Union and its member states, one prominent being your country, Nigeria. Central to our agenda is the promotion of sustainable economic development, employment and prosperity, with a focus on digital transformation.
And finally, Chairman ISM Nigeria, Mr. Charles Emelebo.
I cannot speak about the ISN or indeed the Omniverse without looking back at the evolution of digital innovation in Nigeria. Nigeria has a transforming landscape, not just with its rich culture like we've seen today, but also with the digital revolution that has unfolded across the country and indeed the world over the last 25 or more years. Nigeria embraced technology from the very early days of the internet. In 2022, a few companies such as InterSwitch and others pioneered electronic payment processing systems and laid the foundation for what would later become a thriving digital economy and ecosystem. The journey has not been without challenges. Infrastructure gaps, regulatory hurdles, and lack of access. All these have tested the resilience of a growing digital community. However, adversity is the mother of invention, as we say, and with determination and innovation, we have witnessed the birth of several unicorns and large companies and organizations doing several great things across Nigeria and indeed the world.
The event had its focus around Obi Asika, who recently was announced DG National Council for Arts and Culture and was the convener of the summit. The event was filled with many dignitaries, including the Minister of Art, Culture and the Creative Industry, Hannatu Musawa, in which she announced a fund of 617 million to the investment in digital and creative enterprises, also known as IDICE.
This summit serves as a very powerful aggregator, bringing together the brightest minds and the innovative spirits of Nigeria's creative landscape. Today marks a momentous occasion as I proudly announce the groundbreaking $617 million investment in IDICE. IDICE lays the foundation for sustainable financing, skills development, and enabling market environment for the digital creative ecosystem. In the context of ecosystems, the Omniverse Summit presents a unique platform to network with industry leaders, gain insights from experts, and contribute to the development of policies and initiatives that will drive African innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship forward.
The event had opportunities for young entrepreneurs to showcase their innovative gadgets, for example, VR for schools, which I tried. It's a business that focuses on artificial intelligence, virtual reality, learning to reach individuals that cannot attend normal schooling systems or experiences. Here we also have Isime White, founder, Chief Innovation Officer, Genius Hub.
My expectation is really high, and And even from the entrance to the venue, to the people, to the conversation, you know, this is what we've been saying, this is what we've been looking for, that we don't need to wait for government, we don't need to wait for anyone. See young people coming together to change their own narrative. So we're going to be having conversation with industry leaders, industry experts.
Followed by Mr. Idris, CEO Temple Company and Ogidi Studios.
It's an idea whose time has come. I think it's something that is needed. It's a convergence. Everybody in the same space. As you know, it crisscrosses every part of the ecosystem. And I mean, we must all sit in the same room, and we must all decide how we can collaborate and make it richer, make it better, make it more enduring.
The first day of the Omniverse Summit was truly one to remember. It encompassed and showcased the African heritage with the tech ecosystem. Sadiq Suleiman Garba, Arise News.
Thanks for that report, Sadiq. You're still watching Tech Into the Future. We'll go on a break right now. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for staying with us at Tech Into the Future. You know, last week I had the opportunity of being attending the Omniverse Summit. I thought it was rather interesting. It's supposed to be like a convergence of innovators, tech folks, creatives, academia, entrepreneurs, and literally anyone that is interested in fostering a collaboration, you know, born out of like meaningful conversations, right, about technology and how folks can connect. It's almost like they're trying to build a connected Nigeria in a sense. And it was interesting to see everyone was there, right? From D'banj and Kelechi Amadiobi from the art world to the former director at Google, etc. So they had, of course, the ministers were there from both the art vertical, the creative vertical, and the tech vertical. So very impressive turnout. I had the privilege of moderating a panel, and it was about enabling a connected world. And I feel like it was such a great place to start the conversation from, because everything that we discussed as it relates to technology is of no consequence if, you know, there's no digital inclusion.
Yeah, people don't have access.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have access. And so on the panel was Main One, ATC, MTN. And so, yes, it was a very interesting conversation. I hope we continue to have these types of summits, because I feel like when it comes to technology, sometimes it can seem very intimidating. Omniverse, I wouldn't attend it if I wasn't invited. It seems like they're talking, it's a different world, it seems. But it wasn't, right? It was really for everyone to attend.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a great event, and I like the word convergence. So given Obi Asika's background and the creative sector, it was a really interesting event to see sort of the creative sector come together, but then you brought, you know, the technology sector in there, you brought the international community. Obi Asika recently got appointed the Director General of the National Council of Arts and Culture.
Yes, he did.
So definitely a big, and then he brought the Minister of Arts and Culture to the event as well. I thought the international presence was really, really interesting. You had sort of GIZ, you represented the German ambassador, the UK Trade Department, all represented at the event. It speaks to the importance of sort of tech, creative industry as kind of a source for trade for Nigeria, and a place that actually is quite important in our relationships with other countries. You see organizations like GIZ, the UK Trade Department, investing in our creative sort of industry, investing in it, supporting the tech industry in interesting ways. And I think there's a lot of opportunity if we are thoughtful in our own policy making in Nigeria to make sure that it's meaningful trade and that we are getting what we need out of it. So there's a lot of investment in talent development. The problem with that is always, does it lead to real jobs? But again, if you're thoughtful in terms of the way you formulate policy here, in terms of the way you build your industries here, then it's possible that this actually leads into meaningful employment for young people here or for the entire economy. But all in all, I think a really important event. I think the minister also mentioned sort of the IDICE fund, which has been announced previously, but she announced again, and I believe that it is kicking off right now. Implementation of the fund is kicking off right now. So it's $617 million. It's going across sort of creative, it's called IDICE, and it's so across digital and creative enterprises. I believe it's being administered by the Vice President's office and the Bank of Industry. And so we're keen to see that start to get deployed because you cannot have enough investment in those spaces, and hope we see it turn into sort of meaningful employment opportunities.
You see, as you talked about the foreign investors that were there, I hate to be the one to say this is why we cannot go about arresting executives. This is the exact reason why we can't go about arresting people. And that takes us back to the crypto crackdown in Nigeria. So let me ask you, what do you think? Should other tech companies be worried?
There's definitely a bit of concerns. I've talked about the IMTOs, and there's some big global IMTOs, your World Remits, your Wise, etc. And those are big global companies, but there also are a lot of sort of companies playing locally. And I won't mention any of them just so that I don't drag attention onto them. But I mean, this week we have heard quite a bit of chatter about, so 2 or 3 sort of money transfer companies that are locally incubated, some of those tech companies that we're so proud of and that we always sort of bring out as our model children when people ask what's happening in Nigeria. And we have heard that sort of, whether it's the CBN or the NSA, because they are cracking down on them for security reasons, are looking at them. And I think that the challenge with that is that you have a regulatory environment that just isn't clear enough.
Right.
And again, you're seeing reversals where, for the crypto companies, just about a month ago, Nigeria sort of took off the restrictions that the previous administration had put on them and said, we're open for business with crypto companies. Right. The word was the SEC was bringing more rules, and so we are going to engage with them. And then you have a month later, we're fining them, we're banning them.
Did we not also do the e-naira?
We did the e-naira.
Yeah, I'm saying, I feel like we were all, it seemed like we were moving in a certain direction. We were embracing certain platforms, right? Or the idea of, is not crypto, but it's like electronic currency. It felt like we were moving in a certain direction. I think that's what for me is scary, is that the body language continues to change. So are we open for business or aren't we open for business? Do we want to at least explore some of the opportunities or don't we want to explore? And here's my thing, all these crackdowns, what are we looking for? The big problem here is the Naira devaluation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So I guess then the second question for me is, to what extent are these organizations, or these companies really the problem? Because, so please.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a topic of much debate. And the data is a bit unclear. I mean, we're hearing from the CBN, we're hearing from the president's media aide that $26 billion is being moved through Binance, and that's what's causing the currency to deflate.
So let me ask you, was there any data to support this?
Not a lot of publicly presented data to support it. And the truth of the matter is that crypto, the entire origin of crypto was for people to have sort of freedom from central bank exchanges and to move money freely between countries. Now, when you look at the case for crypto in Africa, it is like, look, there are real and fundamental problems in terms of moving money easily, in terms of moving money between countries, that crypto helps solve. But that opacity also facilitates a lot of, maybe illicit less clear, and so, according to the government, it's facilitating terrorism, money is being moved in large sums, escaping the CBN. And again, to a certain extent, that is the promise of crypto, is that we will allow you to move your money without having to worry about what the central bank governor thinks about whether you should move your money. And so you will see that even in Western markets, there is a lot of regulatory action. And even there, you see some of this back and forth, where it's like one day they're finding Binance, also in the US,
they were fine.
They were fine in the US. On the other hand, you see more and more sort of big exchanges starting to list crypto and Bitcoin as asset classes that can be managed. So there is a little bit of the same push and pull. However, I think the difference in Nigeria is you never see sort of the same regulator that's telling you move forward one day, coming back the next day and saying move backwards. So there is, again, a lack of care and coordination. So you asked the question of, are these exchanges the source of our woes with the Naira? And does finding Binance and cracking down on their activity or cracking down on the activities of the IMTOs, does it actually solve our problems with the currency? And the answer is likely no, because the origins of the woes of our currency are much more rooted in a lack of productivity as a nation.
Exactly.
When we talk about, so part of what affects the currency is inflation, it's all of this, and a lot of this is rooted in sort of just a lack of local productivity. So inflation is driven by food inflation, which is affected by, are we producing enough food, which we discussed on our show last week, we're not. Can that food move from where it's produced to where it's consumed? No, it can't, because the roads are bad, because security is an issue. All of those things affect sort of inflation, they affect the value of the Naira relative to any sort of international currencies. And that's kind of a simplified explanation. But it means that you can solve some of these problems in terms of, well, what's happening? Are people round tripping your quality, your currency? Is there speculative action against your currency? But to fix it on a long-term basis, you have to raise the value of goods produced in Nigeria relative to goods imported into Nigeria.
Exactly. So for me, I think my challenge with the entire thing was that it seemed like it came across to me, maybe it was just me, it came across to me like the cryptocurrency guys were used as scapegoats, right? Because Nigeria was in a panic. I personally was in panic. By the time the Naira reached 1,900 to $1, I was in genuine panic, right? And the next thing we know, there are all these bans, and they're linking, or there was the linkage of these bans to, you know, to the devaluation of the Naira. And then when people started challenging that, then it now moved to illicit movement and terrorism, etc. So for me, I think that's where you lose the trust of the people, right? If on a regular basis, on a regular day where there was nothing out of the ordinary happening, the CBN came up and said, you know what, we're taking a second look at this thing because we see this amount of movement and we suspect terrorism and illicit funds are moving, et cetera, et cetera. I might buy that that's the reason. For that to happen the very week that the Naira has reached 1.9, and we're trying to talk about illicit movement, I'm like, come on, let's not do that. Especially when at the end of the day, we haven't, again, back to coordination, right, is that in my mind, I'd like to see other things happen in parallel. That would convince me that we are actually targeting the same thing. So like you said, what are we doing to increase the productivity, right? In the different verticals, where are we exporting anything and bringing in FX into the country? What are the actual things that we're doing from an economic standpoint, as opposed to this that we seem to be doing, hoping that it's almost like you're deflecting in a way. And that's what for me is challenging, because then it sends the wrong signals into the atmosphere. It just says that, listen, if we get panicked, you could be next, whoever you are, right? We'll find a reason. And that's not, again, it's a signaling to the foreign investors, but also to us. I feel like, for me, I want confidence in a government that seems to know what they're doing, and everybody's kind of walking in the same line. I don't know.
I think a consistent theme in this show is that despite the fact that we're focused on technology, the actions of the government, the actions of economic management have a really big impact on the ability of those technology companies to be productive within this, to be productive and to be successful. And so to a word that's kind of come up over and over and over again over the course of this episode is coordination. And Nigeria's challenges, whether devaluation, whether inflation, just across the economy, they're complex. And they require a joint up thinking in terms of the solutions for them. And so if there's anything that we'd say from this show or from this desk, it is, as the government thinks about the solutions or thinks about policy in technology, thinks about policy in economic management, it needs to be coordinated. Indeed. It means that what's happening You can't have a minister of, arts and culture that's pushing,
Exactly.
pushing to bring investment and to deploy investment in this space, while on this end, we're jailing sort of foreign investors and pushing out messages that say Nigeria is not ready for business. It means that when you're trying to battle inflation, you are also thinking beyond sort of interest rates and fiscal policy and thinking about real world things that affect your inflation. And so that coordination is a thing that the government really needs to be a lot more deliberate about if we're going to have successful tech companies or a successful economy, all in all. We'd like to thank you for joining us today on Tech into the Future. Join us next time as we take you into the business and the impact of tech in Africa, how it's changing the world, and how it's changing your world. Stay tuned for Arise News.